which it is unable to withstand. It is bent when it gradually nurses a mistake. As we go on year after year, without changing our points of view, without rising above some limitations of ourselves, we have the right to ask ourselves a simple question. If we've reached 50 years of age, how much better are we as human beings than we were at 20? How much real integrity have we built in? Have we sacrificed a great deal of personal advantage to maintain some collective security? Are we passing through one divorce after another? Or have we gradually learned to solve these difficulties? A solution always straightens out a bent twig. But if we just keep on having bends in the twig and nothing is done about it, there is no solution, and we continue to make the same mistake indefinitely. We continue to suffer for it indefinitely, but we can declare this is our right because we are free agents to do as we please. And we're going to do as we please regardless of consequences. Now life has to change this for us, and it will. Of course, it may take a little longer than we expect, because we're not changeable in most of the good things. All our changes seem to be changes that lose ground rather than advance causes. But even if it takes another 25 lives to do it, we are going to get over it. And we're going to get over the things which in actual, factual, personal experience hurt us. We're going to realize that things that we want will destroy us unless we stop wanting them. Things that we need and must have will not be present until we stop evading them. Everything that is necessary should be available to a mature mind. We do not need to be educated out of the power to think. And we can be so overeducated in delusions that we are no longer capable of straight thinking. Under those conditions, we have an academic twig bending procedure. And the individual graduates from a great institution with so many limitations and restrictions upon his judgment that he can scarcely be expected to amount to much of anything in the present embodiment. We just can't make it. But all this is foolish. And we're getting gradually to the point where the folly is becoming unbearable. We're not able to stand this much longer. So it's very encouraging to find everywhere springing up individuals determining to change things for the better. There has been a great increase in interest in religion in the last 50 years, and much of that religion has been free from the negative purgatorial emphases of past generations. Religion is now being looked more and more, regarded more and more as a constructive force in our careers. It is to do something to help us. It is not a system to frighten us out of our vices, but to inspire us into our virtues. The purpose of religion is to build positive life, not to bind individuals to various denominational fundamentalisms. But religion is here. There's been a tremendous extension in it. It has spread from one part of the world to another, and religion today is developing a very interreligious structure. We are beginning to appreciate the faiths of other people. We begin to realize that people on the other side of the earth have good beliefs also. And gradually we may reach the point where instead of thinking of the people on the other side of the earth, we gradually come to notice that our next door neighbor has a religion worth considering. That tolerance in religious matters is a virtue. Intolerance is a mess for all concerned. Little by little, the individual can lift himself out of his own doldrums. He can gradually observe and measure and weigh the direct consequences of his own policies. Now, this may, in some cases, be a little disillusioning, but now there is a growing school of psychology which is no longer trying to explain simply the Freudian concepts. There is a form of psychology that is working on the total person, determined to find the limitations, restrictions, and bends that are influencing mature lives into pain and sorrow, sickness and death. It is becoming more and more realized that each individual must make these attainments for himself. If he has had a good background in family, wonderful. If he has an inspiring education, in spite of all the prevailing problems, wonderful. If he has a job he likes and is doing well in it, good. If he has a family in which he has children that are growing up beautifully and a close family life, wonderful. All these things are to the good, but they are not as numerous as we would like to have them. They are the exception rather than the rule. Now, some homes are ruined because of stubbornness. One member of a marriage can wreck it by simple stubbornness. And unless that person changes, the future is pretty nearly hopeless. There are all kinds of things that rise in the person. What are these values that can build or ruin? Well, you can say, for one thing, each person can just ask himself right now, child or adult, are you happy? And when we say, are you happy, we don't mean, are you chuckling over a joke or listening to a television comedian. We say, are you happy because you are living a kind of life that fulfills you? Are you doing the things that you know are necessary? Have you the happiness of a good, close family, or the happiness of a great self-sacrifice, as in the case of Mother Teresa? Are we happy because we're doing good? Are we happy because we're unfolding potentials? Are we happy because we are contributing to happiness and well-being for other people? Are we happy? Are we always able to meet these things? Are we doing in just and simple manners the majority of things that are necessary to our security? Can we live without fear and die with hope? Is the world in our relationship with it something we'd like to help, but something that we're not going to be ensnared by in the terms of the perversion of the integrities of life? So if we want to know about that, we can begin to think about it a little bit. It doesn't take a great deal of effort to think about these things. We can say to ourselves, I wish I didn't quite have that sharp a temper. I get a little irritated on something and then I blow my top. And I know people who are proud of it. And they're so proud of it, they want everyone they know to hear the explosion. But in reality, what have they done? They've simply scattered misery in the atmosphere. The explosion probably solved nothing, and may have been one of the factors that ultimately led to the dissolution of a marriage. Is the person content to live comfortably? And if he has a reasonable living, how is he using it and what is he doing about it? If he is comfortable, if he has enough to take care of himself and his loved ones, if he has enough to do a few simple things that bring him pleasure, and his pleasures are constructive, then he is probably almost an ideally happy person. He is happy because he doesn't want things that are beyond his reach. He is happy because he has let go of things that he didn't need anymore. And he's happy because his environment is at peace, and he is at peace with himself and those who are near and dear to him. Now, this kind of happiness is shattered by almost any form of extraordinary ambition. The individual who cannot be happy unless he is famous, wealthy, and high office, and generally admired, is always going to be miserable. And no matter what happens, even if he gets to the very height that he aspires to, he's going to find that he has only been raised to a greater misery. He will find that immoderation in ambitions, selfishness in monetary matters, the acceptance of wealth as the final security in life, all these things are loaded with pain. They're not loaded only just with economic and mental pain, but in the achieving of these various ends, he has probably wrecked his constitution and shortened his life and burdened the latter years of living with sickness and pain. The moment the individual does not adjust gently and quietly to normalcy until he finds the ultimate wisdom of the words of Socrates, in all things not too much. Unless he realizes these and knows it and lives according to it, he's in trouble. This is one of the reasons why we have so much wealth in the wrong hands today. We have people who are more wealthy than they need to be and more miserable than they would be with far less material goods. So this is something you have to move in on. Move in and decide what kind of a life you want to live. Then another thing you have to decide is, what kind of a job do you want? What is your real thought about this? Somewhere inside of yourself, nearly you and nearly everyone else has some kind of impulse, an aspiration, a desire, a sensitive area which would stand developing. But very often today, the education of the individual very carefully avoids this. We find a young man who maybe would like to spend 2 or 3 years in the Peace Corps or do something of this nature with his life, and a family that is dying of a broken heart because he isn't going to be a lawyer. So they make a lawyer out of him anyway. And all through his life he has this pain, this insecurity, this unfulfilled desire. I remember one case I mentioned before, but it's long ago, so maybe it'll stand repetition. I knew a clergyman, a very devout, honorable minister. He had always wanted to be a sea captain. He didn't want to be a minister. He acknowledged that if he was a sea captain, he might be able to occasionally perform a wedding or a funeral right on the boat. But he really wanted to be a sea captain. And the thought of being a sea captain broke his parents' hearts. Everything was done to prove to him that it was not a genteel profession. His father wanted him to be a lawyer, and his mother wanted him to be a minister. They wanted to fulfill themselves some way in him. So he became a minister, and he was a good one. And he was very conscientious and so on. And on the mantle in the study of his church was a model ship. He had 2 more ship models at home. He made these models also from kits and gave them to children and other people. And finally, at the end of a long career, he retired. And the first thing that he did when he retired was to buy a sailing boat and go around the coast of the United States. He never got over what he wanted to be, but they wouldn't let him. Now, it's very possible that his mother was right. He was far more useful, perhaps, as a minister. But within himself there was a psychological illness which he never got over. He was a person who was constantly burdened with this sense of depression, a weight on himself. and, as might be expected after a few years of sailing around his boat, a stroke and an invalidism for the rest of his life. The man was not permitted to do what he wanted to do. And what he wanted to do was honest and hurt no one and gave him a fulfillment of something maybe that he brought with him out of the past. He shouldn't be discouraged completely in trying to let loose the pressure within his own nature, as long as that pressure was good. We find all kinds of things of this kind. We realize that nearly all the great artists of history were self-made. They were painted because they had to paint. They painted because of a genius locked within them. Gradually, however, something happened. Many of these artists became associated with the courts of Italy and Germany and France, later in England, and became court painters. As soon as this happened, something else happened. The quality of art began to deteriorate because they were no longer painting because they loved to paint, but because they became a member of an imperial court and were the painter for the sovereign. This became a degeneration of art. And of course, the worst generation of all is an art which is concerned solely with selling the product. These things are wrong. And while they don't necessarily seem to be so wrong, or make such a big show of their own uselessness, you will find the people who have made these compromises, that they have sacrificed their integrities for some reward. If you go into their lives, you will find they all had a bad time. They had a bad time because nothing could prevent them from escaping from pressure through excess. If they had not had the pressure of frustration, if they'd been allowed to do the things that they wanted to do, they probably would have had happy lives and been general contented people. But the only place where you will find contentment to any degree at the present time is in the median distance, neither the wealth nor the poverty, but a security based upon simple tastes, reasonable desires, and the right use of assets. These are the things that come the nearest to being what we must have. Now, in the course of the problem also, we come against the health equation. We must realize, I think, that there is a justice in nature, and that when the moment we break these rules, something goes wrong. Now, you will find in many instances that the health problem is also closely associated with the breaking of natural laws. The individual who lives simply, lives moderately, and lives within a pattern of common sense usually has the greatest opportunity and probability of survival. He will live longer if he is not bound into a complex within himself. If he is doing the simple things of life and doing them well, if he's busy, if he is contented to work reasonably, he will find accordingly a proper recognition. This is now moving into the women in business. The woman in business has exactly the same responsibilities. The first question she must ask herself is why? Why have I given up the natural problems of a woman to take on a business career? Is it because I want to have more leisure? Is it because we want to build a higher standard of living? Is it that we want to have more money and do things we want to do? Or is it because inside of myself there isn't something in me that wants to express itself as an individual? I want to be a painter. I want to be a musician. I want to do what I want to do because of a feeling I've had from infancy. Under those conditions, The failure to do this is a disaster. But the accomplishment of a career for a purpose that is not reasonable, honorable, and within integrities, if it is a sacrifice to others, and if it is a failure to be the person they should be, then the price is too high. Everyone has the right to correct his own faults during the course of a lifetime. And I might add, however, not get too optimistic, because not many people are going to solve all of theirs in any lifetime. It's going to go on indefinitely, because most people, when they start solving problems, make new ones. We have a knack of going on a bias wherever we go. We can seldom go from A to B on a straight line. So that we have to realize that we have a whole group of ailments, and new ailments arising every day, in which nature is pointing out very firmly that there are things we cannot do without injuring ourselves. We are having a great fight over the cigarette problem at the moment, and we're having groups that insist that they are being interfered with, that they have a right to do as they please, that they have no right to have someone else legislate for them. Well, from a political standpoint, maybe they have a case. But as far as nature is concerned, nature has no interest in all of these rights or privileges. Nature says if you do something that's unhealthy, you'll be unhealthy. And that's all there is to it. And the Civil Liberties Union can't do a thing about it. We are going to do what we want to do, and the censorship is not a stroke from heaven. It is not the animosity of our associates. It is not the fact that our boss doesn't like it, or that our children move out on it. The very basic fact is, if we do these things that are not what they should be, we'll be sick. Now, this sickness can be very, very serious. And wealth is one of the greatest causes of ulcers that there is. Most very wealthy people are sick, not only in ordinary ways, but in physical ways. In the last years of his life, John D. Rockefeller Sr. had to live on milk and toast. His digestion was completely wrecked. Now, it doesn't follow that it was wrecked by his diet. He may have been abstemious all his life, but it was wrecked by the weight of his mind disturbing and destroying the digestive system of the body. Worries, fears, anxieties, the great mergers, the tremendous emphasis on this and that, things which have no essential value in life, can destroy health. So one thing you have to realize is that that's one problem the lawyer can't get you out of. It's the one problem that cannot be arbitrated. You cannot make some kind of a special assignment to do as you please and get away with it. The moment a law is broken, there are only two as possible terminations: the natural disaster resulting from the broken law, or the wisdom to go back on the path and stay out of trouble. These are the only decisions. Everything in nature is regulated by the laws of survival. And these laws of survival have been outraged since the dawn of time. Survival has been endangered to the ambitions of countless millions. Survival has been sacrificed to ignorance, superstition, and fear. It has been the curse of ambition. It has destroyed the brotherhood of man and denied the fatherhood of God. So all these things, legislating them is going to be very difficult, because no one wants to be legislated to do something he doesn't feel like doing. And anyone who tries to do this type of thing is subject to all kinds of criticism and even legal action. But there's no one that can stop you, or wants to stop you, really, from growing yourself. You do it quietly. It offends no one. And the worst that they can say about you is that you're more generous, thoughtful, and kind than you ever were before. Therefore, very few people object to the growth of someone else, but they object to being told that another person is growing, and then that person doing all the old things that were wrong. And the person himself has to come face to face with this, that he has to break the habits which not only bent his twig in the first place, but keeping it bended and bending it a little more as he goes along, until finally in the end it breaks. This bending of the twig goes on as long as we nurse any intensity of purpose. If the intensity is beautiful, noble, generous, then the twig, even though it may be a little bent, will have some pretty leaves and flowers grow on it. But if it is something in which we are nursing faults because we like them, if we are worrying because worry we regard as a symbol of dignity, a worrier is a sincere, serious citizen. And the fact is worrying is not going to do any good. That's too bad, but that's somebody else's fault. But worry in itself is not solutional. If a person sees something or comes in contact with something that needs change or needs correction, the simple thing to do is to get to work and change it. Now, if it's someone else, you're going to be in trouble, but nature doesn't want you to turn on other people. Nature wants you to recognize the world around you as a great textbook, and that you yourself, as the Rosicrucians said, each of us is an ABCdarian in this college of the Holy Spirit. We are here to go to the great school of experience, and we must all, one way or another, graduate from the University of Hard Knocks, which is one of the highest colleges that there is in the world. Harvard and Yale, nothing in comparison to Hard Knocks as a basis of growth, of actual development of integrities. But wherever there's a hard knock, you do not simply lie down and hurt. You wonder why. You think about it. You realize that in most cases, the mistake is in yourself, but blamed on someone else. You have misjudged someone. You have catered to something because it seemed to be a little more satisfactory. You've compromised principles for convenience. All kinds of little things have added up to make a life that is no longer in harmony with the divine plan. Now, as we get along further and further in this, and we are now going to start in on our next billion inhabitants, we are gradually growing in population, even in spite of the fact that families are not as large as they used to be. But we are still going along into the future with a problem of population growth, a problem of taking care of hunger and suffering, a problem of better governments, and all these types of things. We are on the verge of a reorganization of life. A new world order has to come into being. And if we are interested in growth, we can change with joy. If we are not interested in growth, every change can be a torture. Everything that breaks the old pattern of our mistakes can hurt. And anything new that we're not acquainted with or not really very much interested in is a disaster. So everyone has to adjust themselves to an attitude that is suitable to his own future. We find people with the same tendencies in retirement. When they retire, they think how wonderful it's going to be, and in a short time they have to find new interests, or retirement is impossible. In the future, we may say, civilization must retire. Sometime this way of life that we know is going to reach its maximum endurance and something has to give. Now, when the time comes for a civilization to retire, let it be in the same way as a well-integrated person. Let that civilization become an elder statesman for the rest of the world. Let it leave behind it so much of good example and good precept and so much of basic integrity that the New World Order can build firmly upon it, realizing that it is building upon the strength of the ages. We don't want to really see a world order blown off the planet or just simply fall apart because of political corruption and leaving nothing but a bad taste behind it. We in the same with ourselves. I believe firmly in the doctrine of reincarnation. I don't expect to finish anything here, but I do wish to leave it just a little better here than it was when I got here. Maybe just a little bit. But also I realize that this is all part of the process of learning how to help. I've spent 65 years now trying to find out how to help. And I found that the best way I know to help is by example. By trying to help people to help themselves, but not trying to do it for them. There are all kinds of organizations floating around that are right ready to save you at the slightest provocation. But each individual in the long run must save himself. So if you have a crooked branch on your tree, you are the one that's going to have to straighten it. Now, when you start to straighten a branch that's been bent for a long time, you have to be rather careful, because the branch may be a little brittle and break, and that won't help too much. But with care and thoughtfulness, a live branch can gradually be bent until it goes the direction you want it to go. And each of us keeps on building stronger, constructive attitudes. We can become branch benders in a major way. And the habits of 10 years of mistakes can be corrected by 20 years of proper living. We can learn to do the things that will save us from the consequences of the things we did before. In a sense, this is education. Because education, even though it is on the human level, is not so different from the education of a well-regulated rabbit family, or almost any animal or bird. Because all the little ones learn from experience. They watch, they observe, they are warned by secret methods that we don't know anything about. But the great education that they all have to learn is keep the rules or perish. The moment the little animal doesn't do what is proper for its survival, it ceases. And as Seton used to say, there are very, very few animals in the wild state that ever die of old age. They nearly all die because somewhere along the line they made a mistake. They were not quite strong enough in keeping. Sometimes hunger became so great that they were too courageous and died in the search of food. Some of them died to get food for their young. But when the simple laws of life were broken, then you have either death or martyrdom. And you have people who die for the good of others. This is quite possible. And in a sense, it is better to die for the good of another than to live on for the ill in ourselves. So all these things work together. But each person has the possibility of taking the life as it is around him and studying it. Not to tell other people or ask other people, but to observe his own personal life. We don't like to think of people writing their own autobiographies, but there's no reason why they shouldn't recollect a few things occasionally, just as thoughts in their own minds. Think back to the best thing that ever happened to you. Think back to the worst thing that ever happened to you. And gradually get out of your mind entirely the idea of chance, or that there are opportunities that are unjust, or that there are miracles. Paracelsus, the Frauenhauenheim, wants to define miracles in a very simple way. He says, as we think of miracles, there is no such a thing. But a miracle is an effect, the cause of which must be equal to that effect, although this may not be visible at any given time. But everything that happens is the result of a cause, and every cause produces an effect like itself. Violence produces violence, peace produces peace. But there's nothing but a constant interplay of cause and effect. And the individual who causes no trouble will be plagued with no effect. It happens, however, he may be carrying a little baggage with him from previous embodiments that he has to live through. But in due time, if he does not add to his mistakes, he will survive them and rise above them. So we can take up to the day we die this problem of straightening out this crooked branch. And even on our deathbeds, we can hold it rather tightly and straighten it in the right direction so it will be headed where we want it to go in the next embodiment. We're going to have to gradually take over our own destiny and live it according to natural wisdom. And sometime education will have to give us the most important gift that it can give us, and that is insight into universal processes, insight into the natural educational power of the universe, the purpose of which is always the same, to bring to perfection all of the creations and creatures which it has fashioned. Study the neighbor, study ourselves, study the universe, and with the right outlook, the right understanding, we will learn to make the corrections in ourselves that will enable us to go peacefully through the years of life, enjoying it in a deep and quiet way, and free from most of its impediments and impairments. Well, that's it.